Ravina, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us this week in our social hour. I guess, Seth, you probably want to give a quick introduction of what the social hour is for all the new faces here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and just a quick reminder, everyone, if when Matt is presenting, if you could put yourselves on mute, feel free to keep the video on. Matt will share his screen, and he'll go ahead with the presentation. Yeah, so thanks, Ravina. And Ravina is going to be facilitating today, so she'll be looking when you have questions, please put it in the chat box. She'll be kind of taking those questions and then taking those to Matt. Just quickly for the social hour, we've been doing these for quite a few weeks now, and what we've really kind of seen is a community kind of coming together, really wanting to have kind of different networking, meeting new people. It's really kind of been a good experience. So I just wanted to mention real quick, Matt is one of those digital marketers. I just say, he has a good understanding of the sales side and the marketing side as well. So I think it's really a unique opportunity here for everyone to really kind of pick his brain a little bit, right? Ask him, questions about, okay, your business from your business perspective, because, he's been in corporate, he's been in the public sector all over. So I think, without putting the expectations too high, I will let him go ahead and, Matt, if you want to share your screen, and yeah, take it away.
Sure. How's everyone doing today? Can you just give me a thumbs up on the reactions instead of everyone saying, we're great? Just give me a second to share my screen. You should all be seeing a bright orange screen right now. Excellent. Okay, so, well, thank you all thank you to Tourism Burnaby for having me here, and thank you all for joining us. I think as Seth has kind of alluded to, I would call myself a digital advocate over expert. I don't believe anyone's truly a digital expert at how fast things change. So I've been doing this for over 15 years now and have really been focused in the digital space primarily. My experience ranges from areas such as digital transformation and product management to digital marketing and engagement. I've worked both private and public sector for the financial industry, for the chemical industry, and now in post-secondary, currently leading the digital marketing team at UBC Sauder. I'm a huge believer in digital, but even more so, I'm a huge believer in digital's role across the entire customer journey, which right now is almost entirely digital, which is great to see. Bad circumstances, but great to see how people have been able to shift. And it's going to be interesting to see how prominent that shift stays as we get back to normal over the next few to possibly several months, depending on how things go. But a couple days before we kind of got sent to work from home and things shifted, Seth and I were having dinner, and he had asked me if I would mind coming and chatting about digital marketing at one of these events that he was planning. So at the time, I had a rough idea. I agreed, and I had a rough idea of what I would cover. But as time has passed, I've realized that what I would have covered back then in talking to Seth has changed considerably because things are changing on a daily basis. So as I was reviewing my content last night, I realized that I had to make some changes. So what I'm not going to do today is really give you a sense of how to do digital marketing on a shoestring budget. Because to be honest, the truth is what we're seeing today as things change is that digital is actually getting more expensive with where we are. Because everyone's trying to go on, get digital and use digital to their benefit. So what I thought would be a better approach is to approach this from a digital engagement perspective and give you an idea of the things you should be considering right now when it comes to engagement. The reason I wanted to do this, instead of just talking about here's where you can cheaply get some marketing spend put in and get some coverage, is because I actually believe that this is where you should be putting your focus in a number of different ways, and we'll go through those through the presentation. And I think by focusing on just how you engage digitally, you actually allow yourself to focus any budget you may have in a very efficient manner on pieces that are actually working and engaging with the audiences that you're trying to target. So as I go through, feel free to interrupt and ask questions. Or, sorry, I stand corrected. I think we have a break halfway through where you can ask questions. So put your questions in the chat box and then we can go from there. But I'll start off by giving you an idea of where I think we are today. So I definitely think that gone are the days, or temporarily, let's say, gone are the days of the Abercrombie and Finch models with the highly polished look and the fantastic hairdos in our advertising. That idea that we're seeing ads out there with people having a great time together and big festivals and those types of ads and that type of marketing is really kind of being pushed by the wayside as we start to see that the whole notion of how we now socialize in the COVID-19 space is become the new norm for marketers. And what I'm noticing is that the really good brands have moved away from imagery that is not supporting the idea of social distancing. They're really putting themselves out there and saying, we have a role to play in making sure that people are embracing the idea of social distancing. And if you are not too busy right now with responding to everything that is COVID-19 and have an opportunity to watch TV, you will notice some of the big brands out there, they have changed over the last few weeks as they started to find a new normal for themselves. You'll notice that the immediate family or oneself has become the focus of advertising, which in a way, from my perspective, should just always be there, but I think it's increased now because that's who you're around on a day-to-day basis. You're not really around your friends or anyone but your immediate family or the people you live with. And everyone now knows, I suspect, that you're on a lot of email lists for companies, because if you've experienced what I've experienced over the last 4 weeks, is my email box on the personal side of things has been bombarded with emails from companies I didn't even know I had relationships with. I don't anymore because I've unsubscribed, but email, which some would say was dead, has essentially come back to life with full force. So email is kind of a communication channel that people are relying probably too heavily on right now, which creates some opportunities in other areas because people are paying too close attention to email as a marketing tactic. And as you all know more than most, the theme right now is adaptation as the new normal. And that's also occurring on the marketing front as it is for businesses. So the question right now from a marketer's perspective is, how do you sell a product in a time like this? How do you sell a product when they can't physically come and see it? Or how do you we're trying to sell education, for example. How do we sell education when we don't actually know what education is going to look like in September right now? So lots of unknowns, but people are embracing it and are adapting. So unless your customer is this fellow here in Florida, I don't know if everyone has seen this clip, but this is a famous, I think they call them Florida idiot, where unless your customer is completely unaware of what's going on or unwilling to acknowledge what's going on, you really, really have to be careful about who is your message going for right now and who are you targeting, because it could be you're targeting this customer here, but if you're not careful with your message, it could hit in a very bad way, because COVID has become a bit of a polarizing topic for people depending on where your audience is. I think in Canada it's less of an issue as it is in the States, but there's definitely still two sides to the coin in the COVID side of things. So luckily for me, what I'm seeing is that in the marketing space, and particularly when it comes to engaging audiences digitally, there's a whole lot of good coming out in the messaging. And people are shifting in ways that are actually really encouraging for a small business. And we'll go through what some of those are later on. But You can see it in some of the work that celebrities are doing, and just everyday like influencers on social, and the good stories that they're telling right now. So I don't know if anyone has seen this series by, and I'm going to butcher his name here, John Krasinski from The Office, Some Good News. He has just taken some time to ask his followers to submit good news from around the world. And it's a very low production quality video. It's getting a whole lot of attention and a whole lot of following. And it's very just natural, organic, and authentic. So the stories themselves are great, but from a marketing point of view, the stories aren't the only story. Because if you start to look at some of the pieces that are getting put out, these are pieces that are putting together on cell phones. They're being filmed by significant others. They're being filmed by kids. They're being filmed with kids. The quality isn't the greatest. The actors look like they haven't got a haircut in months because they haven't, or haven't shaved in months because they haven't. But somehow they still look better than our prime minister. So maybe some grooming tips for him. But the whole point is that this type of production quality and what they're putting out is actually an average marketer's worst nightmare. This is something that at UBC Sauder, our business units would put out, and we would cringe at and go, why did you do this? Why didn't you come to us so we could put this highly polished piece out to support you? And really, the reality is it's okay right now because people are accepting of this. They realize that you can't bring a film crew in. You can't go out to your marketing group and get your agency in and the whole 9 yards. But from a marketer's perspective, it's killing us. But the key here is that quality is not important. It's really the message. The message is what is resonating most with audiences right now, which I think from a quality perspective, there's opportunities there from a small business perspective, because it means that people are way more accepting of videos that small businesses already produce because they don't have the high production quality that some of these big houses would, like the marketing houses. So you're kind of getting put on a bit of even footing right now if you're doing video work that looks a little more organic and authentic. What else am I seeing from a trends perspective? So not only are most people working from home, the way they're working from home because all of their family is home has changed, and it's changed in a way that I don't think people expected. So I have colleagues who work half a day and then have to spend half the day teaching their children. I myself just got a new puppy, and now I'm working and trying to make sure the puppy doesn't destroy my house. So there's the idea of working from home is changing. But what that's also doing from a marketing perspective is it's changing the types of messages we're seeing. And I'm hoping you're noticing this as much as I am, but brands are being way more empathetic than I've seen in the past to people's current situations of working from home, both from a marketing perspective and both from just internally how they work with their own employees, which is then getting them some PR coverage as well. So there's a whole lot of good happening out there. But the important thing to remember on this side of things is the messaging is about being empathetic, not sympathetic. So it's a fine line, but it is very much about putting yourself in their shoes and making sure that the message you're really delivering is, we get you, we get your situation, not you poor thing, are you okay? So there's a big difference in the messaging that gets delivered in that side of things. Some things that I've seen lately that have been impressive shifts for me, for brands and organizations, in that idea of making sure that they're showing that they're empathetic, but they're also adapting. So brands are looking at their communities, their customers, their members, and really looking at it through that empathetic lens. And they do appear to be trying to support. Whether they have other motivations behind that, some of them are coming across really well. There's a local organization or company in Vancouver called Isle. They produce reusable feminine hygiene products, but they have shifted their production to help produce medical masks for the downtown east side. and they're getting a lot of good coverage right now because they've seen that they can adapt, and they know that as a brand they should be supporting their community. So they're putting part of their business aside so that they can do this, and they're creating some real goodwill out there in Vancouver that they've gotten some really good coverage. Full disclaimer, this is also a UBC Sauder alum, so just in case you see that. And Heiser-Busch is another one that's has gotten, it's less so now, a lot of coverage for shifting much of their production to producing hand sanitizer. So really looking at what can they do with their business to support the community out there. But then there's also obviously that brand play. They're still getting the acknowledgement, and they're getting picked up, but they're doing it in a very empathetic way. McDonald's in Belgium is producing puzzles for families, recognizing that families are at home, they need something to do. So they're actually producing puzzles. I don't think they're with family with like a kid's meal. I think it's actually just with all their meals. They're producing them and distributing to the customers. And Airbnb, I've noticed that they've obviously recognized, and there's probably some business rationale behind this as well, but they've recognized that they have hosts that rely on them for income stream. And they've shifted to providing an avenue where if their hosts are able to, they can provide virtual experiences. So they can still provide revenue. It's not high volume revenue. It's small, like $5 here, $7 here, but it's an opportunity for them to really show that, hey, we've adapted and we can help you. Obviously they are helping themselves as well as a business. Interesting, you can actually go on an experience with goats in a European country virtually. I don't know what it looks like, but it sounds interesting. But I think the important thing to remember about all of this, whether it's a brand or it's yourselves, the thing that's working right now is authenticity is winning, and authenticity is key. The messages and the content that I'm seeing get picked up and get digested more than most is the messages that are coming from the heart of the organization or the heart of the people distributing them. And thankfully, they're from good places in the heart. But what I would say is you do need to be careful with this type of messaging. So if you're walk out of this presentation and you want to start a vlog and start talking from the heart, I would make sure that you take a minute and realize that authenticity is not an excuse for being lazy. Messaging and communication definitely needs to be rehearsed and delivered well. You have to do your research and really understand who your audience is right now. Your audience, it can't be Canada. You need to know your audience, you need to know your segments, because a lot of what is being put out there from a content view it's not going to take a lot of money to produce some of the stuff that you're wanting to put out from an engagement perspective, especially if you already have a following. What it will take is time. It will take time to do it right and to do it well. And the reason you want to do this is you really want to think about how you should be engaging with your audiences. You really, whether it's a small business, whether it's a big business or an individual, you need to really think about it, because right now in digital, the volume is up in terms of just the sheer amount of advertising and content that's being pushed. Spends on the digital side have been shifted. Spends have been shifted to digital because there's no print happening. So they're shifting pretty largely into the digital space from what I've seen. Content generation is at what, in my opinion, is like an all-time high. I've never seen so many webinars be put out and tips and advice from people. It's all coming at us at breakneck speeds. And as I said earlier, email at an all-time high. My inbox every night, I'm deleting 20 or 25 emails from these vendors, but email is definitely overwhelming, which creates some opportunity because everyone's focusing on digital. So I know I'm the digital guy, and you're probably going to laugh at me saying this. Where people aren't focusing is on some of that traditional marketing. So there is opportunity on the mail side of things that I don't think people are fully recognizing. I think there's an opportunity right now, if done well, you create a mailbox moment that others are not. And it's something that we're exploring at UBC Sauder. And it is something that I think businesses really need to consider. And that's coming from a guy who makes his living on telling people not to do print. And then you also have to consider the fact that people are at home, people are bored, people are looking to pass time. So they themselves are pushing content out like crazy as well. But they're also spending a ton of time online. Facebook and Instagram and TikTok seem to be the platforms of choice right now. All are reporting significant increases in use and growth. So those are areas where if you are going to look to get engagement, if you are going to look to do marketing, that's where I would put your efforts, because that's where, and if the audience is right, that's where I would put your efforts, because that's really where we're seeing growth. And I can tell you that just from our experience at UBC Sauder on Instagram, our students, that's what they're doing right now. They're all over Instagram, and it's a great communication channel for us to be able to reach out to them and make sure they're doing okay and engage with them. But you also always have to remember competition for attention right now is high. So that's where that need for having a great message, well crafted, well rehearsed, comes from, because you're competing really on a message level, not just a budget level. So before I go any further, let's stop and see if there's any questions. I can't see the chat window.
Hi, there doesn't seem any questions in the chat window, but I have a question for you.
Okay.
So you mentioned that people at home are spending a lot of time online, which I'm sure all of us can very much relate to. My screen time on my phone has gone astronomical, where I've had to turn it off so I stop feeling guilty. How can businesses kind of take that volume, especially with things like TikTok, where I'm loving seeing all of it, but I have a hard time figuring out how to apply that into a business sense? What would your recommendations be?
I think it depends on the business, obviously. TikTok is a bit of a new thing for me as well, and I'm trying to figure out how we can even use it. But what it appears to me is it comes down to, what are you trying to do with the message? So if you're trying to get a good message out there, I think there's an opportunity there just as a delivery mechanism. Or if you're just trying to show that you're connecting with your audience and you understand your audience, just even participating in some of the challenges that your audience might be participating in, it may not make sense for this group, but it may make sense to go out there and do a bit of a dance on TikTok and really get in there, just to show that authenticity, and that you are human as well. You're not just a brand that's kind of prim and proper.
Perfect. And then we had one question in the chat. What do you think about LinkedIn?
Oh, you'll see later what I think about LinkedIn, but what I will say now is, by far, if I understand the group today, LinkedIn is probably one of the top tools I would be using right now. I would probably use it differently than you might be using it, maybe. And I have a bit in my slides on that we can get to in a bit.
Perfect. Okay, I think let's carry on.
Okay. Excellent. So as we carry on, where are the opportunities that I think exist for this group? Because I do think there are a few, but two stand out the most for me, and they are somewhat related. So the first is all in the concept of giving, and I don't mean giving money, and I don't mean donating. I mean giving your time and your expertise. So if I remember correctly, and I really hope I got this right, or this might not work, the large portion of the audience are event planners. And I think there's a skill set there that organizations like mine are not recognizing that we could definitely leverage. I also think that there's opportunity for you to reach out to previous customers and clients, really offer help in how do you transition them to online events. Because I can tell you now that from my point of view, our events team, for example, I shouldn't say our events team, but the people in our teams who are responsible for events are they're not event people, so they do it off the side of their desk. So when you shift that to now you have to do that in an online space, they're having a hard time. They're having a real hard time doing that. And I think that's where there's some opportunity for event planners to get into that space and really help organizations shift. And I think there's also an opportunity where you can publish your thoughts, for example. So if you have thoughts around what is working for you, and whether it's the success you're seeing with online events or issues that you're running into, I think you guys are subject matter experts where you can actually provide advice to others and create really engaging content if you're not already doing this. What I would say is this would suggest that you use video as much as possible and really get out there and put yourself out there and offer thoughts on how we should be doing things in my space. Like, how do you take convocation and make it a virtual event? Because it's taken a team of over 100 at UBC to figure out how we do this. So there's definitely opportunity there. And I would say that as you're putting these tidbits of information together for your audience and trying to distribute it out, keep it as short as possible. And give yourself time right now to create as much goodwill as you can. Because for me, people who are reaching out to us right now and really just trying to help, they're going to keep getting our business when we go back to normal. There are obviously times where the question is, should people be charging for their service or not? I would not hesitate or be offended if someone reached out to me and said, hey, I can help you with your convocation or your graduation, and their expectation was that I would pay for it. I think 2 weeks ago, my opinion was slightly different, but now as things kind of get to a normal, I think it's okay to charge for your services. But I would obviously focus on the goodwill over everything else, because when everything does get back to normal, people are going to remember that. And I wouldn't also, if you're doing all of this stuff and you are giving your time and you're offering up your services, make sure people know what you're doing. Celebrate your successes online and really share what you're doing, because I don't while I don't think it's crucial that you do it in a very overly promotional way, I do think it's crucial that people know you're doing good things as a small business owner, because I think it's important that when things come back to normal, you have that following where people are like, hey, I remember when someone did, when we were in trouble, you helped me here. And I really think that's where it'll be a long-term play, but I think that there's some significant opportunity there for you. And when it comes to budgets, I would focus your money on pushing that good, authentic content. I wouldn't put money into buying ad space or search terms. I would focus on sponsoring your content where you're telling people all the good things you're doing. Focus it there, because that's really what's resonating with people, over like a display ad or search ad or anything like that. I just think that where we are right now, it would just, you'd be wasting money putting it in that space. And I talked a little bit about this, so these are kind of interlinked, but the second place is the opportunity is, as I was saying, organizations are trying their hardest to figure out how do we migrate to virtual events. We have no clue. And I can tell you that with confidence, we have no clue. We're not events experts to begin with, as I said, and we're certainly not virtual event experts. And we are 100% not going to be a combination of those as we migrate out of COVID-19. So there's clearly going to be a space for digital when it comes to events as we move out of our current situation. I don't think virtual events are going away quickly. We're going to have to figure out how do we combine them together. And Connie and I were actually talking about this when we had a chat a couple of weeks ago. There's definitely going to be a need. And I think that's where, as event planners who have that experience, you can help us shift to those virtual events. I think I'll put a disclaimer in there. Please don't reach out to me tomorrow about convocation if you're an event planner. But I would look at your like past customers, or look at organizations that you know have done really big, large, or even small in-person events on an annual basis. Like, just take a look at their social feeds and go back in their posts and just look at what they've done, and proactively reach out to them and just say, hey, I noticed you did this event last year. It looks like an annual event. I think I can help you shift this to the online space, and here's how we can do it. It may not hit every time, but I bet you there's organizations out there that are trying to figure out how to do it. Our go-to right now is that we've actually just canceled the events instead of thinking about how can we shift it to an online space. So that's where I think you have an opportunity to get in there and at least create the thought of, is it possible that we could actually do this online? So I think that's where social media is going to be a big asset for you. Facebook, obviously, if you go back through posts and just see what the annual historic events look like. LinkedIn, obviously a great way to look for who you should be connecting with at organizations. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn because I just think the one-to-one connection that they offer is by far ahead of anyone else. And I think what LinkedIn offers you is the ability to look at organizations that you want to work with, and look for people who are responsible for event management. From my experience, these roles are typically marketing coordinators. If they have an event coordinator, you might have less of an opportunity there, but a marketing coordinator typically does these events off the side of their desk. That's just from my experience in the credit union world. You have one person doing large events off the side of their desk, and there would be an opportunity there to reach out to them and say, hey, we can do this for you online, and here's how we can help and bring this virtual side of things together. Because what people are really thinking is, I'm going to save a whole bunch of money because I can do this event online. People are not thinking about what the event needs to be. And I think Connie may have talked about this in one of her sessions, but they are thinking about it as a cost savings measure, and they're not looking at it through the lens of, how can I create a really good experience, which thankfully we are actually shifting our thought process to at UBC when it comes to something like convocation, because we really want our students or our graduates to have a memorable moment, not because of COVID-19, but because it was just a really good experience. And I think that's where organizations really need help right now. And you guys have the skill set. I think that's an event planning skill set that even when it came to physical events, organizations didn't have it, and that's why they were reaching out to you. I think that's the skill set that's still there. It's just shifted into the digital space. So all that to say, right now I would be proactive, and I can tell you that being proactive will be greatly appreciated, especially if you come with solutions. It would be greatly appreciated. And I say that not from a marketing lens, I say that from a business lens. Because really where we're going is, the new normal to me is a mix of normals. It's going to be what we had before and what we have now. And that idea of blending those two together is going to be hard for, I can tell you in the public sector, it's going to be very hard, because we don't adapt quickly, regularly. But I know just from the private sector, it's going to be hard as well. How do you combine a physical and a virtual event? I don't even know how we would do that. Because the fact of the matter is, we know that people crave connection, and people are craving connection more than ever right now because we're not getting it. And you are all really good at creating connection. So that's what I would ask you all to do as I conclude, is help us connect, because that is not our expertise. And thank you. That is it. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
We have a couple questions, so I'm going to go through the ones in the chat, and then we can open up the floor. So starting with one that we got just after the session restarted, is, oh, sorry, where is it? So she's curious about the new normal for influencer partnerships with business to consumer.
With business to consumer. So the influencer looking to use influencers to connect to the consumer?
Yeah. So how we've moved to an influencer culture and using them in our brands. And so how does that shift in this, this world, this changing world?
Yeah, I think that I'm not sure if it shifts too much. I think that what we probably will see is that influencers are likely going to have a greater influence right now, because they have that captive audience. That captive audience is even more captive, and I can definitely see them being a lot more. So if they were effective before, they're going to be way more effective right now. What I do suspect is that influencer marketing is going to cost a lot more, because if they're smart influencers, they're going to realize that people are going to want to work with them quite a bit more than they have in the past.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Next question is, how do you make money from an online event? How would you recommend that?
Yeah, so as I said, my opinion 2 weeks ago was you probably shouldn't be trying that, but my opinion has changed, because I do think there's opportunity now that people are getting used to it. That I think you can, as long as the event provides value to the end user, I don't see why there wouldn't be an opportunity to charge for the events. Outside of just charging for attendance, I'm not sure how else you would do it depending on the event. There could be opportunities where maybe it's something that happens after the event, or maybe there's a unique experience associated to the event. So there's a free event with like a freemium option, where you can use something like Zoom to have a breakout room with the panel and have a more in-depth conversation. I think there's definitely ways to do it where you can mix free and paid together, in the same way that you would do with a physical event, kind of like a VIP room almost.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we can open questions up to the floor if anyone wants to ask them. If you want to just raise your hand. Connie, yeah.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Couple of questions for you, actually. I'll start with the one that we just finished off, just to add on to the Eddie's question about how to make money online. To add to that, because I am studying, I'm getting the certificate for the event, virtual events meeting management, and some of the discussions is about that topic. So there's a couple of ways. One, you can actually leverage the marketing for your event, and really, if you do a great job, there's sponsorship there in terms of funds. That's one way of revenue. And then the other approach that you can also look at from an attendee's perspective is creating a tier experience. One, you can have like a teaser where everyone can have access to like the main key note speaker who's really engaging and really, has that powerful content that everyone wants to get, and that will kind of drive the traffic into that event and that experience and that interest. And then from there, your next tier would be, what can you do that is exclusively available for that paid audience from a virtual perspective? You can do that as well. And then when you move into the hybrid mode, which is like in our 18-month future, when we can do live events again, and you still want to have that digital element, you can actually still use the content from the virtual and repurpose them for future as well. So there's many different ways to really be creative about the revenue part of making money from virtual events. Now, my question to Matt, from a digital marketing perspective, especially for small businesses, KPIs are looked at differently now, because in the past, it was more about a conversion of like, I'm going to market here, I want a high conversion in terms of sales. But if a lot of people are not really have that consumer confidence, or that product or that service is not available at the moment, how should businesses look at their marketing dollar spend to the KPIs? What's your suggestion?
Yeah, I definitely would encourage you not to forget about your KPIs. So, and conversion for me is always the key. But I think the way to shift now is to think about conversion later down the line. And what do you need to be measuring now that will impact those conversions? So to me, a KPI that you should be looking at right now is the contact information that you're able to gather. So are you collecting email addresses? Are you collecting phone numbers? that volume should be a key KPI for you, because that's going to allow you to then reach back out when you can and generate those conversions. So your conversion point is essentially moving a little bit more up the funnel in the interim, while you figure out how can you actually take those contacts and create that conversion you need to. But I definitely wouldn't forget about conversion.
It's very important. The other question I have for you, if I can ask, is from a marketing lead perspective. So right now there's that empathetic messaging that we're providing, and we're not really in the selling pitch mode. But when is it the appropriate time to actually ask for the sale? Tough question.
Yeah, and it's tough because I don't think there's a right answer for this. I think it's going to be based on, and this is going to sound like I'm trying to get out of this question, but it is going to be based on your feeling. Like if it's a one-to-one conversation you're having, I think just with sales in general, you're going to get a sense of whether or not it's appropriate. But I would say if it's kind of a situation where you don't want to ask to get married on your first date in any situation. So you're probably dating for a little longer, to continue with that analogy. But I really don't know if there's like an ideal sweet spot that you can do it. I would have said that 2-3 weeks ago, don't do it at all right now. Because there's typically in a crisis, there's a period where you kind of just want to let the crisis be dealt with, and then you start to come out of it. And what I use as a measure of when can you start feeling out business again is when you see the bigger brands start to come back. So 2 weeks ago, McDonald's, Harvey's, Burger King, all of those types of brands started to play ads again. And that tells me that was a shifting point for where we are with COVID-19, where people may be a little more open to the sale, but still tread lightly.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Was there any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I don't know if anyone else have some time here. So Matt, a question I just want to ask for our hotel partners is, so when you mentioned the traditional mail, so that is something that I realized maybe there's an opportunity here, is where if we're promoting staycations, or saying we're promoting the people within our province to go, come and, stay at our hotels and experience, maybe some sort of, parks in Burnaby. How would you package it properly to mail it as, to a family, for instance? Like what is kind of the key? I mean, I know you're digital, but I know you kind of have an opinion on this too. So what's your kind of advice for our hotel partners?
I wouldn't play too heavy on the crisis. I would play on the benefit to the family. So if you're looking at it, it's really about the time together away that they haven't really had. So they've been stuck in a house right now, stuck at home, not being able to get out, but you're providing an opportunity where they can safely get away within their own province. Cost is always going to be something you need to think about, because I think that's going to be top of mind for everyone right now. And I think in terms of how do you actually get their attention in the mail, it has to be something exciting. So don't just send a letter. Put a little bit of a creative piece together that creates maybe even a moment for the family. So I'm not saying send puzzles out to people, but that McDonald's idea of a puzzle creates a moment beyond just the dinner table. So you're engaging with McDonald's brand the entire night, and probably longer, depending on how many pieces and how good your family is at puzzles. So if there's a way to, and this will be a graphic designer's dream project, if there's a way to create that type of moment for a family, while also trying to encourage them to come and visit Burnaby, I think that would be an amazing way to kind of create what they call that mailbox moment for them.
Okay, and then I think, Beck, did you have a question still, or yeah? Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We really appreciate your insights, Matt. Thank you very much for taking the time.
No problem.
My question would be around authenticity. So obviously you have pointed out that relating to your audience and relating to your customers, whomever you're trying to approach or trying to deliver the message to, is important. So we know that everybody has their network, and especially in the event space or event planning connections that you might be reaching out to first. But what would be your recommendation for the businesses and for individuals to, if they're trying to reach out beyond, obviously, e-blasts, as you said, are including my email inbox, it fills up, and a lot of the times you just become one of them, and your message does not really get to the person. So what would be your recommendation in terms of delivering that authenticity on a one-to-one basis?
This is why I favor LinkedIn over other social media channels, because I see less of this on LinkedIn, but I think you can do it in quite an appealing way. So I can tell you now that I have probably had about 6 or 7 solicitations through LinkedIn that I just completely ignored because they're using traditional tactics. But if you were to come to me and say, like a month ago, say, I see that members of your team are responsible for putting convocation on. I think I can help you, and here's some ideas I have. If you're throwing ideas at me right away and offering solutions before you're even starting that conversation with me, I'm going to be way more open to talking to you than if you're following the, hey, I'm a sales guy at this organization and I want to know if you're interested in my CRM product. I'm not even going to engage at that point. But if you're offering me solutions that are going to spark my interest, I'm definitely reaching out, and I think that's key. So that's where that idea of getting a sense of who they are and where you could provide value immediately, at least for me, shows that you've done your research and you're actually interested in a relationship.
And then, Matt, we have a question from the comments from Sally. She says, how do we get the mail piece out to leisure guests such as families?
Well, I still think the mail houses are still functioning, because I think we're actually looking into a couple now where they still can pull the lists that you would normally get from Canada Post, where they have the demographic data that you would be able to leverage. So I believe you can, I am trying to think of the companies that do it, but they're standard mail houses where you can reach out and give them an idea of who your audience is. And they know based on, I think they leverage census data or some sort of data that they have. Canada Post actually has a really good offering for this, where they can narrow down by neighborhoods the types of demographics that you're looking for.
Perfect. Is there any other questions? Connie, yeah?
Just a follow-up question on that, because that sounds very interesting to me. For Canada Post, just to make that personalized approach, and even in mail instead of mass mail, does Canada Post actually give you the capability to get the name of those residents so you can actually customize the message with their names on it? Or is it just like, here's a blanket message, mail blast?
Yeah, so they would give you the list. Canada Post or a mail house similar to them would be able to give you just give you a list that you would pay for. Then you work with a printing partner who can do what you would need in terms of taking fields from an Excel file and put it into the print piece. That would be the actual printing partner who would be able to do that.
Thank you.
Is there any more questions? No, I don't think so. So Seth, if you wanted to chat a bit about next week, and thank you so much, Matt. It was very informative. I learned a ton. I'm sure everyone else has as well. We have lots to take back to add to our businesses. And hope.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
No
actually, sorry, Matt. One more thing. I'm just thinking about like this whole idea of we're trying to give people like I guess a lot of our hotel partners, and not just in Burnaby, but I mean our colleagues in other cities too, right? We're trying to give them like, as you mentioned, like kind of this authentic when you're talking about outreach, you want to be as authentic as you can, right? One thing that I was thinking about was, the idea of producing, or having safety videos from our hotel partners, right? And then having them show exactly what's going on inside the property. How do you feel that's going to come across? Like, just, from a consumer standpoint, because I mean, everyone needs to know that they're going to be safe, right? I mean, that's top of mind, I'm assuming.
Yeah, and I would look at it. I don't see much in the media right now that would cause people to think that a hotel isn't a safe environment. Like there doesn't appear to be much negativity around, like, am I going to catch COVID-19 if I'm staying at a hotel? I don't see that. Cruise ships might be a little bit different, but hotels, I haven't seen much negativity around it. So I'm not sure that it will resonate in the way that you're thinking. I think the better way to approach it is start with the value that you're going to be offering, and recognize that there are table stakes that you're going to have to acknowledge, and safety will be one of them. And it could be as simple as just highlighting what you're doing to ensure that your I was going to say residents, that your occupants at the hotel are going to be safe while they're there. So I'll candidly say, at a personal level, a safety video feels a bit boring to me. If you can make it exciting, maybe, but it kind of feels like when you're sitting on an airplane and you have to listen to how to put your seatbelt on. I think the better approach would be show the value first, and then reinforce it with, not only are you getting that value, we're going to take care of you while you're here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. Just one last call. Just before I start introducing that next week, we still have about 5 minutes or so left. Any other questions at all? Anyone want to kind of bring one of your, digital marketing queries to Matt? Oh.
Am I allowed to ask a question? I have a question for Connie. It goes around the charging for events, and it's more to get your opinion. But one thing that I've recognized is that people who are charging for events, think because it's online, they need to charge less. And I'm of the opinion that that might not be the scenario, as long as you're hitting the right quality and you're giving an experience that is worth it. But I think everyone's go-to is, I have to do things cheaper because it's online. And I'm just curious, in some of the coursework that you're doing, is if they've covered any of that.
That specific question, they haven't, but I think it goes back to all of your recommendations in terms of focus on value. And from a value perspective, if you're able to prove, especially, I think the biggest thing in our coursework right now is, what is the cost on live events versus virtual events? And a lot of the big assumption is, oh, it's virtual, it's a lot cheaper. And our initial conversation we had last week was about, don't, decimate your live event budget when you go virtual, because there's a lot of other considerations, there's a lot of other costs. There's a platform cost, there's a streaming cost, there's actual technical producers that you may need. That you're not the expert. I'm an event planner, but I'm not a virtual planner. So going into that realm and getting the technical background and expertise involved in the testing and prepping your speakers as well, there's a lot more cost than you can imagine for virtual. So to justify the cost of your event and build it to the right quality and the right platform, there is a cost in there. So I think as long as you can create the right value to your attendees, they will more than willing to actually pay for it. You don't have to lessen it. I think it's just showing the value. And then the other element is, the cost of the event now is not live, it's virtual. You're saving on flight, you're saving on hotels. You're actually, it's more convenient for you, but we're still going to be able to deliver the same quality. I think you may be able to show the value of the cost that you're asking for when you go to virtual. So things to consider.
Yeah.
Hope that helped.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. Thanks, Matt and Ravina and Connie, for your perspective. So next week we're going to be taking a bit of a shift. We're going to be moving into what we're calling virtual networking. So we're going to be putting people into different rooms, breakout rooms, and we do actually have some very interesting kind of lead facilitators kind of prepared. So just a kind of a little bit of a preview. We will have folks from different sectors, so such as Rocky Ozaki. I think Matt, you probably know him as well. He used to be a HR disruptor. He doesn't like to be called HR anymore. He now works in basically what is called, I guess, the future of workplaces, and so he works with organizations to develop what future of workplaces look like. We actually had an interesting conversation today, and Connie was on that one as well. And he's going to talk a bit more about reimagining, what kind of the future looks like, or how organizations are going to be working with different companies. And so that's going to be one room that's going to be focused on, maybe call it innovation, maybe not. I would call it more, kind of, I think it was reimagining, was it? Or maybe it was disruption, Connie? Or
It's both. It's imagining the disruption. So it's
Yeah.
pushing the envelopes of, instead of just planning and having Excel sheets of what you're going to do, it's actually putting those ideas and not just ideas into action. So, instead of having a meeting about a meeting, let's actually do something about it. So that's what Rocky's going to talk about. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, Rocky has quite a different, his energy level is quite unique. So I think everyone will find that quite. The other room that we have is we're going to also have a room with Connect, which is they're going to be continuing to do their big trade show in New Orleans in August. And so they've created the safe space kind of guideline. And they're going to be talking about how they've actually created that guideline and kind of all the different considerations they put in, because typically their event attracts over, I think, 5,000 to, how many people. So they're going to be trying to do that in August with, kind of a safe, kind of physical distancing. So two folks from their team, one of their directors and one of their West Coast representatives, are going to be coming on, and they're going to be leading that room. We're going to be having another room, which is going to be really kind of focused on small business. So we have YVR Prep, which is a small business here in Burnaby. Jason Wong, who's one of the co-founders. So they're a commissary kitchen where they've invited local Burnaby restaurants or food producers to come in and go to their kitchen and kind of be a channel for them to reach consumers. So Jason is, I followed him on LinkedIn a little bit. I reached out to him. He's volunteered to come on and talk about how small businesses kind of work together in Burnaby, and even extension. How can they work with hotels in Burnaby to kind of help draw traffic in? So Jason's going to be leading that room. We also have a room focused on sports. So with sports coming back, so my colleague Jennifer Scott in Sport Burnaby, she's going to be leading that session, talking about what exactly sports is going to look like from all her discussions with different provincial and national sports organizations. How can hotels help these organizations? How can you guys support them? How can other folks support these hotel organizations? So that'll be the fourth room. And then we're going to have one last room. We have 5. So the fifth room is going to be just about meaningful networking. So we have SFU stepping up for that, SFU Beedie, so my school, former school. So they're going to be having two of their managers come on and talk about how you can kind of create those longer, more meaningful kind of connections with people, whether it's professional, whether it's mentors. So they'll kind of give that perspective, maybe a bit more from a post-secondary lens as well, but I think it's applicable for everyone. So that's going to be the fifth room. So I'm hoping everyone can kind of, be ready to kind of network next week. I think it's going to be a really interesting, this is going to be a different way that we do things, but definitely looking forward to it. Any questions at all? Or
Seth, is it going to be optional for the attendees to pick which room they want to go to, or is it going to be a random?
Oh, yes. So we're gonna actually ask you when we do registration, you're like which room you want to be a part of. And so what's gonna happen is once you go into the rooms, we'll actually then have you guys chat. Maybe it's a group of 8 or 10. You could have a larger group, but then we'll have everyone come back into the main room and kind of give your kind of takeaway, share what you guys discussed. And this is kind of our first go at it. So, if we have some delays, or I'm just going to say it right now, if we have any technical difficulties, don't give me a hard time. And then the following week, we'll refine it, we'll get better at it. So, any questions or anything, any people that you think we also should be inviting for the future? Any requests at all? No? Okay. All right. yeah, that's it kind of for me. I'm happy to see everyone again this week. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ravina.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank
Good to
you.
meet you all.
Okay, thanks for your time, guys.
Have a great night.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a great night.